Let's go!
10 top retro video games that will remind you of the good old days. It's okay to admit it. You're a sucker for retro video games. It's okay because there's a reason why so many people are into them. As with everything vintage, the sense of nostalgia for our childhood and the good old times is still able to grip our curiosity like nothing else. Don't get me wrong, I'm a huge fan of the new AAA titles, but there's something different about exploring the world of retro gaming through eyes that are now used to 3D graphics and insane animations. The visuals of old video games might not be as good as modern titles, but it's all part of their charm. It's crazy when you think about it. One day you're playing Sonic the Hedgehog on your Sega Mega Drive, and in the blink of an eye, you're binge-gaming The Legend of Zelda on a Nintendo Switch, and both experiences are equally satisfying. Retro gaming has witnessed rising interest in the gamers community in recent years, with more and more people being drawn to classic consoles and games from the 20th century. We've seen new titles trying to bring back the nostalgia factor by offering similar graphics and gameplay mechanics to those classic video games we grew up with. And even if they are a pleasant adventure, nothing beats the memories of when, together with the other kids, we visited an arcade, asked our parents for some coins, and fought aliens in Space Invaders. That's why we've put together a list of some of the best retro video games out there, so you can make sure that next time your friends want to play something old school, they don't have to be stuck with a single title. Number 1. Super Mario Bros. 3. The best retro games have the power to take us back to a time when we could just kick back and play with our siblings, parents, or friends. And no retro game does that better than Super Mario Bros. 3. The music is iconic. The graphics are timeless. The gameplay is challenging but fair, and there's a reason why it's been ranked as one of the top games for NES. It's basically impossible that you never played this classic at least once in your life, but in case you didn't, then you're in for a treat. It's still just as fun today as it was back in the 1990s. Number 2. Tetris. If we talk about puzzle games, it has to be Tetris. It was invented by Alexei Pajitnov in 1984 and has established itself as one of the great early video games. The objective of this game is simple. You must use the falling blocks of different shapes to fill the rows without leaving gaps to gain points. If you want to really instigate your competitive side, there's a multiplayer version where you can play against other players worldwide and see which one of you will be the last one standing. Number 3. The Legend of Zelda, A Link to the Past. The third release in the Legend of Zelda franchise, it was one of the best games to see the light in the 90s, and I would argue that it's also one of the best games in general. It's a classic Zelda title with all the elements that make up a great game: engaging gameplay mechanics, an intriguing story, and the memorable characters that made us fall in love with the series in the first place. Its spiritual successor, The Legend of Zelda, A Link Between Worlds, was released in 2013. Number 4. Ms. Pac-Man. Ms. Pac-Man is a video game created by MIT hackers after founding the General Computer Company, licensed by the American company Midway Manufacturing Company. Released in 1981 on an arcade machine. Number 5. Street Fighter II Turbo. Street Fighter II Turbo was a massive success when it launched in 1992 on arcade machines. It was a big deal for two reasons. 1. It helped establish Capcom as a major player in the video game industry. 2. It introduced a more intense gameplay experience and new special moves for the characters that contributed to its popularization. There's no doubt it's one of the best 90s games, period. Number 6. Sonic the Hedgehog 2. Raise your hand if you also spent your childhood afternoons playing with the most famous hedgehog of all time. If you didn't, let us tell you what you missed. Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is a platform game that follows a blue hedgehog who runs through side-scrolling levels collecting rings and defeating enemies along the way. Unlike the first game, this one features a multiplayer mode, a new character, Tails, and faster gameplay. Number 7. Super Mario Kart. For those who didn't notice, the first Super Mario Kart was released 30 years ago. Yep, 1992. Sure, the first title is a little rough around the edges compared to its modern siblings, but that's what makes it so charming. It represented an important stepping stone for the franchise since it led to the expansion and popularization of the Mario series outside of the platform games category. It's often credited for creating the kart racing subgenre of video games. Number 8. Donkey Kong. Did you know that Donkey Kong is the very first game in both the Donkey Kong and the Mario series? Talk about vintage video games. Donkey Kong is an essential part of the history of video games and saw the light for the first time in 1981. It represented the desperate efforts of Nintendo to create a video game that could rival the success of Namco and its extremely popular Pac-Man. Well, what can we say? Mission accomplished. Number 9. Duck Hunt. Duck Hunt is a handgun shooting video game developed and published by Nintendo. He first came out on April 21, 1984 in Japan on the Famicom and in North America on the Versus System arcade system, then was part of the Nintendo Entertainment System console launch games on October 18, 1985 in North America, then was released in Europe on the same console on August 15, 1987. It is the first game to exploit the console's gun, the NES Zapper, which is used during a virtual duck hunt. Number 10. Space Invaders. The game that started it all. Space Invaders, released in 1978 by Taito, defined the video game industry with its simple graphics and gameplay. It paved the way for the next generation of shoot-'em-up games to the point it has been considered one of the most influential games of all time. Space Invaders is also considered the pioneer that initiated the golden age of video games, a period around the 1970s and 1980s that witnessed the insane growth and rising popularity of video games in the global industry. They were one of the best old games, with which our childhood was beautiful and our past was beautiful. If you liked the video, do not forget to follow the channel and like the video. Thanks.